Hello and welcome. My name is Anthony Kerrigan, and tonight we are joined by Steve Parsons from Para.Science.
No, just parascience.
Parascience. Parascience. All the way from the UK. How you doing, Steve? Well,
I was fine till that introduction. I was watching your video. You do like your Ouija boards and your disco lights, don't you?
Oh, I do. I love disco balls. I love disco balls, especially when partying with the ghosts. But yeah, Ouija boards and all that kind of stuff we do go into there. But also mysterious. We're going into tonight. Then we're going to Mysterious Pembrokeshire, close to where Steve lives. You live in Pembrokeshire, isn't it, Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very close to where Steve lives. Also, we're going to be talking about animal apparitions. Have you seen one? Maybe you can tell us there. Steve's going to be talking about a few of them. Also, we're going to be talking about measuring techniques, ways, methods of how to investigate what is a sound wave. Also, what are the units using some of the devices that we use. If you have any questions, feel free to put them on this post. You can also go to our website, www.GhostÉire.net, go to the contact page, fill in the blanks. If you have a private message, just put in brackets private message. Also, if you're affiliated with any paranormal team or group or tourist attraction, feel free to name the group or organization in brackets, and we'll give a shout out to you, and everyone else can go towards your page. Also tonight, folks, we're going live through the GhostÉire Channel, the red button on www.GhostÉire.net. Just click on that, and you can see Steve and myself away from Facebook, but you're even better on here. Or you can go and watch past shows and what's coming up on the future there. We'll also have a competition later on where Steve can join one of you in the Halloween mega draw, but you got to correctly guess the right answer to using a piece of instrument in the Edinburgh Vaults. So we're going to do a few shout outs there. I got all that out. Warren Coates. Hi, Warren. Warren from Northern Ireland Paranormal Research Association. He'll be there
Good evening, Warren.
Mary Nolan from Back in Time is also the part of the committee, and myself there from Back in Time Paranormal Investigators. Hi, sis. Joanne Breen. Good evening, guys. How are you both doing?
I was doing fine till I had to do a podcast.
I know.
Sunny outside. Do you know it's sunny here in Pembrokeshire?
I know.
It's a beach now.
Yeah, it's probably. I know it's sunny here. Like, I don't know
why I'm doing this. This is those something is for at night, not when the sun's out.
Why don't we just finish it now, Steve?
Right.
See you there. I'm joking about it.
Yeah, try to book yourselves till the sunset.
Brian McMahon from Belfast Paranormal Investigator says, "Hi guys, hi Brian, how you doing, Bo?" Ron says, "Good to see you there." And Paul Bryan says, "Hi guys." Paul. Okay, so that's you, Paul. All right, so we're going to talk about three subjects tonight: mysterious Pembrokeshire, animal apparitions, and measuring techniques. So first of all, mysterious Pembrokeshire. Can you tell us there, Steve, any attractive sites around Pembrokeshire that have an interesting?
We're talking tourist now. Am I doing the tourist thing?
Yeah, you're doing the kind of tourist thing. First off, yeah. It's like
one of the most mysterious things about Pembrokeshire is the fact that most of the rest of Wales and the United Kingdom doesn't know that Pembrokeshire exists.
Yeah.
The world stops at Carmarthen.
Right.
And as you drive along the M4 and you get to Carmarthen, you'll see a big sign just before you get to Pembrokeshire, and it says, "Here be dragons."
Right.
Or at least, we don't have any trains, we don't have any buses. So that's one of the great mysteries of Pembrokeshire.
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't even know. Like, I was looking for them because I like a bit of cricket, watching cricket. I was just looking to see if they got a cricket team, a county cricket team.
No. Well, there probably is one. I mean, there's a local cricket pitch up the road where all the dog walkers go and let the dogs crap everywhere. But I mean, let's be serious for a moment.
Yeah,
Pembrokeshire is a west coast. It sticks out into the Irish Sea. It's only 35 miles at its closest point from the southeast of Ireland. And there are so many links between the two countries. And at this point, we actually share a lot of the mythology with Ireland. We have fairies, we have a lot of the sort of myths, the mythical creatures, and the folklore is quite common to both sides of the Irish Sea, right down Western Wales, but particularly in Pembrokeshire. And we have a very sort of close bond historically as well, in that there's a lot of Pembrokeshire and Irish families where they have relations both sides of the channel, not the English Channel, the what's it called, the St George's Channel.
Yeah.
And you have, like, for example, Hook Lighthouse was built by William Marshall, who was the builder of Pembroke Castle. Right. And the Roach family, who have Roach Castle, or built Roach Castle, built quite a number of castles similarly in the southeast of Ireland. And going over to the southeast, which I've done a lot, you find that there is so many similarities. The geography is quite similar too, although with us being west facing and the southeast of Ireland obviously facing opposite, we tend to get the wet side of the weather.
Right.
Whereas on the southeast coast, it's drier and sunnier than it is in West Wales. But as regards mythology, we have. When I was at the Dublin Paracon, I was talking to Mark Gearan.
Yeah, Mark.
About some of the folklore myths and legends, and almost every one of them that we mentioned was mirrored by a similar Irish one, or in fact, an identical story from Ireland. For example, there's a spot near St David's, which is one of the most westerly headlands in Pembrokeshire. And St David, in fact, was a compatriot of St Patrick, St Padraig. And the Welsh always like to remind the Irish that St Padraig is actually Welsh.
Yeah.
But there is a spot near St David's where, according to the legend, there is if you stand on that particular spot, you can see fairy islands off the west coast of Wales. And if you move away from those spots, the islands disappear. And we have, Mark was saying that there are very similar stories, and also about the fairies coming to the markets. So Mysterious Pembrokeshire, you could just substitute it for Mysterious Southeast of the Republic.
Yeah. It's interesting, as you said there, like I used to live in a place called Ardennainig. That's the market of the fairies there. But so it's all associated with what you were saying. So.
And the language too. For example, we used to have it got squashed by a car, but we used to have a cat, a grey cat, and it was called Puka.
Oh, cool!
Which is the Welsh word for poltergeist.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know.
And it's also very similar to the Irish word.
Ghost.
There's also another Welsh word up in North Wales, Bubach, which has got a similar word in Irish.
Right.
So it would, if I was talking about Mysterious Pembrokeshire, I would really, if we dwelt on it, it would just be, well, I'm just telling you everything you already know anyway, because you've got exactly the same 35 miles away.
Yeah, yeah.
The closest capital city to where I am is actually Dublin.
It's mad, isn't it? Yeah.
So, it shows how far west we are.
I know, because I live in Carew. We were talking about this before, because you're coming to the convention next year there, and you're closer to Wexford than I am on the other side of Ireland, like Kerry on the west. You'll get there probably before me there. Put Steve there. But we're going to show a video in a bit there, and one of the castles that you did have.
One of our famous castles.
One of the famous castles there. Is there any, but apart from that, or including that, is there any locations that are associated with strange phenomena now linked to the paranormal?
Well, the funny thing is, I have a local radio show here, in West Wales, and it talks about, you know, the ghosts and other unusual phenomena, UFOs and alien big cats and all the other weird stuff that doesn't fit onto conventional radio. And there is most of the conventional haunting stories are fairly similar to anywhere else that you would expect to hear them. You know, things moving about in the house, shadows. But there does seem to be more of a reluctance in people this far west. Events out here in Pembrokeshire, ghost hunt nights, don't fill up as easily.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah.
I mean, part of the problem is obviously that people won't travel this far west. You know, we're 60 odd miles from Swansea and 40 miles from Carmarthen. So people don't like traveling and then, you know, having to travel back afterwards. But you don't get very many local people turning up. But they've always got a ghost story of their own. You know, we've got haunted roads, we've got haunted woods, we've got every castle's got its own ghost. And we're not short of castles either. I mean, I live quite high up, but from the different windows of the house, we can see 7 castles.
Jeez, oh, wow.
And we have ancient burial sites. You know, we have sort of miniature Newgrange, if you like, dotted all around the county. There's a Bronze Age burial chamber within half a mile of where I am now. So we have a great deal of history, and with history comes that mythology and that folklore. And you have some interesting and weird customs because it is quite isolated. For example, only up until less than 100 years ago, so in the 1930s and 40s, it was not uncommon in some of the remoter country areas of Pembrokeshire, after somebody died, the night before the burial, and prior to the wake, the sort of lying in before the burial, so they were put on the kitchen table. They would be wrapped in the shroud and hauled up the chimney.
Up the chimney.
Up and through the chimney, as a sort of weird rite of passage. The other thing that is still talked about here, and was again quite common up until the early part of the 20th century, was the idea of the sin eater. So prior to the funeral, there would be somebody in the village known as a sin eater, and they would bake a cake or bread that contained the sins of the recently deceased, so that pass through the pearly gates.
Oh, that's cool.
In terms of folklore and mythology, there was a guy in the 1890s, Jonathan Carradine Davis, who wrote the definitive. He was a folklorist and a local historian, and he wrote the folklore of Pembrokeshire and the mythology of Pembrokeshire, which, you're talking a fairly hefty volume that's been regurgitated in almost every paperback ghost stories and folklore of Pembrokeshire that's ever been published down the years since. And there are many of them. We've got almost, every year that passes, somebody writes another $5.95 paperback for, sale in all the gift shops.
Yeah. Not about my book.
We haven't seen your book yet over here. I'm waiting to see one of mine in the works.
There's got a few more shout outs there before carry on there. So Bridget says, hi to you both. Hugh says, hi guys, Hugh's from County Antrim Paranormal Research Association. Was camping with the lads there during the weekend there, Stephen. Rams Island, which is in Antrim.
My first wife was her family were from Antrim.
Oh, cool. William Marshall, the first Earl of Pembrokeshire, founded New Ross, County Wexford.
That's right, we did.
There we go. Joanne Breen from Seekers of the Afterlife says, geez, it could be a huge cake if my sins been put into it. So that would be a big cake. It depends on what kind of cake.
Yeah, you have to move to Pembrokeshire because I don't think the Irish still don't you have sin eaters, do you?
I've heard.
Although it's within it's actually within the Catholic.
Mm,
You know, in fact, there was a movie, wasn't there, the Sin Eater?
right.
But this is a Welsh tradition, custom that goes way back to the 16th century at least. That's when it was first documented. Prior to that, of course, you know, things weren't documented. So it's almost certainly much, much older than that.
I'm going to go on to. I'm probably going to show a bit of footage now before we go on to the next question, which is very interesting. So this is from the Wall Street Journal. Steve was voted the best, the gold standard of ghost hunting in 2012 and 2014. Steve, you're a legend anyway. Like those years, you're amazing. Anyway. But if you just watch this video, this gives a little intake into
I remember this.
Where Steve investigated. It's like a charity. I know, it's great now, but it's interesting and it makes a good point now, which we'll all go on to now in this second there. So this is from the Wall Street Journal back in 2012.
Carew Castle is a crumbling Norman fort in remote western Wales that was built around 1,000 years ago. The castle is home, or so it is said, to a number of ghosts, and among the cognoscenti, Carew is known as one of the most haunted castles in Wales.
It's most famous for its ghost ape. Many people report that the ghost, the spirit of this ape, still haunts Carew to this day. Some even claim that they have psychically picked up on this ape, or even themselves been attacked by it.
Steve Parsons comes from a venerable tradition of sober-minded inquiry into poltergeists, haunting, and otherworldly beings. He's been at it for 35 years and has attended several investigations over the years at Carew Castle. This is his area of expertise, a homemade infrasound detector, which costs thousands of pounds and man-hours to build, and which he says is sensitive enough to pick up infrasound produced by storms all the way in the Mediterranean. But now Parsons' life work is haunted by some unsettling new phenomena. An explosion of public interest in ghost hunting, fueled by the popularity of television shows such as Most Haunted. The mania has spawned hundreds of ghost hunters who head out on weekends to scare up a few spirits in the castles and manors dotting the British countryside. And that has sidelined Parsons and his team of scientifically minded investigators. He used to receive 2 to 3 requests a week from people who wanted a discreet inquiry into their haunting problems. But he says the requests have almost completely disappeared. Instead, people want tabloids and television shows to come document their ghost discoveries. That's driven up the price of renting a castle like Carew sharply.
When I first moved down to Pembrokeshire 5 years ago, you could have Carew Castle and the tidal mill adjacent to it for £100 for the night to bring your ghost hunting buddies along and spend the night here. Today, just for the castle, if you wanted to bring your buddies along, £350, please.
For the Wall Street Journal, this is Matthew Dalton in Pembrokeshire, Wales.
So that was from 2012, and that was Pembrokeshire. That was for the Wall Street Journal there, Steve. So the question was going to pose to you there is, have you noticed in recent years, I suppose, probably the past decade or so, has it increased or decreased the amount of paranormal nights at these locations like Carew Castle? Or
I seem to have frozen.
You're frozen. I know you can hear me there, can you?
I can hear you perfectly. You're moving about, but I seem to have ground to a halt.
Oh, I can see you there, moving there. I can see you.
It's a bit weird, isn't it?
You're moving there like so.
Yeah, on the main screen, it seems to be like blowing myself a kiss, but there we are. Yeah, the situation hasn't improved at all. In fact, the situation has steadily gotten worse from my perspective, because I'll give you an example. To the year before the pandemic, so 2019, I was asked if I could organise a charity event, ghost hunt. And this had nothing to do with, not real ghost investigating. This was just a group of people who wanted to spend a night in one of the haunted sites that we have here in West Wales. So we spoke to Scolton Manor, a local authority owned Victorian pile and part of the Pembrokeshire Museum Service, and they generously gave us the building, and we ran what was, with the help of Barry John, the site.
John, yeah.
We ran this charity event for local and national charities. And we said at the time, because it had never been done before, this location, it didn't have a big reputation. It just looked the right sort of, had the right ambiance. It was a big Victorian stately home that was a county museum, that had a number of, it had been a hospital in World War II. The staff that worked there, the curators, it didn't really have any ghost stories attached to it, but that didn't really matter, because we were organizing a charity ghost hunt.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of small areas of interest, like the basement, inevitably, and it had a museum of childhood. Right. So it's full of toys and dolls from the era. So it looked absolutely apart. So we did this charity event, and it all went very well. It was all very successful. And we said to the curator during the night, you realise that we've promoted this, and your phone ain't going to stop ringing. And I think so far there's been 30 since then. Yeah. There would have been more, but for the extended lockdowns. But what's interesting is the lurid stories that are used to promote the venue. I'm still friends with the curator. I still go to the location because there's a kiddies play park there. We take the boys up there, and so in fact, we're talking to them at the moment about running a charity event this year for one of the local charities. But when you look at the advertising being used, a site of countless ghosts. I think they've gone from 0.5 of a ghost back in 2019 to there must be at least half a dozen by now. And it's always, because of the Museum of Childhood, inevitably there are children ghosts, and there's a murderer ghost, and a trapped victim ghost, and the children can't get out, because the nasty ghost won't let them pass over, and the psychic has to come along and save them ghosts. Yeah. And all of these sort of standard, ghosts that you could imagine have now moved in. It's Pembroke Castle, another castle that it's William Marshall's castle, and has many similarities. If you look at Hook Lighthouse and you look at the main keep of Pembroke Castle, you can see where he got the idea from. Now, when I first moved down here in 2007, Pembroke Castle had one ghost, one solitary, lonely ghost. There was rumours of a second one, but there was never. But there was one that had been documented back in the 1970s, and this was supposedly a priest in the chapel area. Right. At the last count, Pembroke Castle has more than 35 ghosts.
Bloody hell, Steve! You're bringing them all down. Like they're following you.
Nothing to do with me. They started to do public ghost hunt nights. They realised it was lucrative, and so they started. And then several of the local groups arrived and did their own. They brought their team sensitives along, and people said that they had experiences. And I was talking to Howard, who Howard moved down from the north of England and brands himself the Ghost Finder General. I don't think Richard Felix knows about that, but he brands himself as the Ghost Finder General. And he said he's made it his he runs the public ghost walks around the castle, which take place. Well, they'll be starting shortly, and then run through till around Halloween. He claims that there are more than 100 ghosts in the castle.
Right.
Now, as far as I'm aware,
just one.
But it just shows you what happens, because you'll get a location where, it could be argued, I suppose. Well, you don't know they're there unless you look. But staff don't see them any more often. It's not the staff that are reporting this huge influx of ghosts all moving to Pembrokeshire and taking residents in Scolton and Pembroke Castle, and indeed Carew Castle, which has increased the number of ghosts dramatically in the last sort of 15-20 years. But people have experiences there, and those experiences become fact. And then other teams, the next team following along uses that as a marketing, the basis for marketing their own.
Give it a name and give it a character.
And you see that in so many locations. Margam has exactly the same. The number of ghosts in Margam has expanded dramatically. And as I said before, it could be argued if you don't look, you're not going to find them. But it's odd that the staff who work in these locations sometimes, late at night when the public aren't there, clearing up, tidying up, whatever else after other events, they say, well, we don't see anything.
True, yeah. It's mostly the staff, like the locations that you see, even going back to say Most Haunted and all that, when there were places that you've been to with staff that are there, they've witnessed stuff there, but tend to be only a few people that do see things like, yourself with locations, as you just explained there. Usually, if the place isn't well documented as a haunted place, nothing really does happen there. Nothing has happened there that nobody knows of.
And I mean, I understand if I had a big old building and there was a suggestion of a ghost story attached to it, I know how lucrative it can be. I talked about Carew Castle going from 100 to 350, and you don't even get the tidal mill. Now it's gone to, I think it's 450, 500. And that's for effectively half a night. Way back when it was 100 quid and you had 2 locations within inside the castle complex, they also gave you breakfast for your 100 quid.
Yeah, that's good.
Times have moved on. So I understand the temptation. If you've got a large building and it has, costs, which aren't going down, are they?
No.
And you need to cover those costs. You need to, repair the roof or fix a chimney. Then this is a lucrative way of making money for your building. But some of the rates that are now being charged are ridiculous, and the people continue to pay them, and so there ain't going to be no change in it. And more groups incorporate a public access side to their operation. So in fact, there was a group that formed here in Pembrokeshire a couple of years ago. There's been a few that have come and gone down the years, but so what they do, this group, is it was actually formed from some members of staff at Pembroke Castle who saw what the castle was doing. Obviously, they can't do it in the castle. And there was another group who were quite successful with their little YouTube following on social media, sort of doing these live ghost hunts on YouTube and or Facebook. And this group started. They set up their Facebook page. They then asked for likes and following. They still hadn't done any for. In fact, none of them had ever been on an investigation at this point ever. And then once they had enough followers, they then said, right, we're going to do an investigation. Where would you like us to go? People, they were given a choice, and then they were hit with that'll be £35 each. And of course, that's what they do. They go out 2 or 3 times a month on social media live, and then have an event for the public.
Yeah, I've seen it a lot here, and it's, I suppose, as you said, it's only going to go up even more. I suppose the price,
Well,
if people are willing to pay it there.
Well, the groups need access to the locations,
Mm.
and locations know how much groups are willing to pay. And so you end up in this kind of vicious circle that the location will ask 100 quid. Oh, look, they're paying that. We'll ask 125.
True,
Oh,
yeah.
they're paying that. Or you get groups actually, and we've seen this with Skolton and Carew, where groups are trying to outbid one another. Where they'll contact the venue and trying to get exclusive access to the venue, to control the access to the venue. Saying, well, we'll handle all your ghost-related marketing publicity, and we'll supervise people who are there on the night in exchange for, access or a fee or whatever. And you get this sort of increasing cost of the pursuit.
Yeah, it's interesting because whatever happens usually in the UK would follow suit then soon enough.
Oh,
in
yeah.
Ireland, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mary known from back in time says quite a lot of locations have jumped on the dark tourism bandwagon and are charging extortionate
Yes, they are.
rates for overnight investigations.
But you can't blame the location because you have. As Joanna's saying, the price is to charge too much, but people are willing to pay them.
True,
and as
yeah.
long as, her suggestion of joining, bonding together to reduce the cost by refusing to pay, it only requires one group. What you've done there is kick the door open to the one group that won't join in. And let's be honest, para-unity is meaningless.
Well, means beyond, isn't it? So it's beyond.
No, para-unity, this idea of we're all looking for the same thing, we're all in, what happens is, groups will stab each other to death in the race to get to a location or to control a location. And the owners of the properties realize, Warren's saying that there are too many greedy owners, and that's right. But if I owned a stately home with or castle with a ghost, and there were some idiotic people who wanted to give me several £100 to spend the night there, would you refuse?
Yeah. So you got to keep I suppose the uptake of keeping that building.
Yeah.
The uptake of it is also the issue as well there. Eleanor B. Scott. Hi, Eleanor. Also at the convention next year. Hello, Anthony, Steve. Lovely to see you.
Hello.
Made a Knights Templar just before he died.
Talking about William Marshall.
I thought you said what she was doing. I thought that's what she was doing tonight.
We talked about haunted locations in Pembrokeshire. It must be. It was a good few years ago. There was another local radio station, and they decided one Halloween that they were going to do a live radio ghost hunt.
Right.
And so we got hold of a psychic medium, a local psychic medium of some repute. It has to be said, and this is the sort of psychic. She had never been on a ghost hunt in her life before.
Right.
She was one of these that just did readings for did the tea leaves and did tarot and readings for people. But so we dragged her along, and now we used one of the Martell.
We lost Steve there for a second. I think Steve has gone there. What we're going to do, folks, is Steve, if you're watching this, Steve, can just press the link again. But that's that, folks. I haven't caught Steve off there. We're doing it. But we're still live. We're going to finish doing the quiz. So I'll give you the word. This is Twitter. I'm going to make it wrong. The word you have to type in is evolution. Hope everyone can see me or hear me there. Somehow we just got cut off there. Joanne says we can't hear me there. There might be a technical issue there. So we'll just wait 1 second there. If you can hear me, let us know. If you can't hear me, let me know. So if I don't know if you can still hear me, folks. Can hear you. Okay, so if anyone's there, if you can hear me now, I'm just going to wait for Steve. Hopefully Steve can come back in there. If you're there listening, Steve, just use the same link again. Okay, now. So everyone there, this is your chance. Pembrokeshire, be the first one to type that down. Pembrokeshire. I don't know what happened there, Steve.
Nor do I, but it's
No,
working.
I don't know where we were talking. I know, yeah. I didn't cut you off deliberately. There's something weird happened. This doesn't happen usually. So we're just going to the quick competition. And Joanne Breen's got in there. Joanne Breen is listening to what I'm saying.
Get in there.
Pembrokeshire. Okay, so you're in for the chance to go in the Halloween mega draw, Joanne. And stay tuned there after the next subject, and you can have a chance to go into the draw. So Joanne. So Steve there. So we were talking about.
Were we?
I think we were talking there. But we'll probably pass on to the next subject, which is animal.
I finished that story. It was a good one as well, because when we got to the part with the naked ladies,
the lady there,
the mic had cut out. Yeah, well, you'll never know now.
The naked ladies. So coming up in second, it was still waiting for still only Joanne, just in case if Joanne goes off, still nobody's actually the second person's done the correct spelling. But anyway, we'll go on to the next subject, which is animal apparitions.
Oh yeah, we've got one of them in Pembrokeshire.
Yeah, so the most interesting one there is what's the one with Carew Castle then? So
well, in the video, Carew actually has two ghosts, or two historical ghosts. There are many more now. One of them is the white lady, who is supposedly the apparition of Princess Nest. Princess Nest was a real person.
Right.
She lived in the medieval period. She got around a bit. She kept getting kidnapped and having kids by different people who kept kidnapping her. She was quite a gal, apparently.
Right. Okay.
But Pembrokeshire, Carew was one of the castles in which she lived, and so her ghost is. But the most bizarre is the ghost ape. And now there are different versions of the story, but one of the most commonly told is that Sir Rowland ap Rhys, who was the owner of the castle, the lord of the manor of Carew, his daughter fell in with one of the sons of one of the local merchants, and they decided that this was love and they were going to get married, and Sir Rowland didn't like this idea at all. He was completely against it, and he forbade them to see one another. So somewhat miffed, the local merchant made his way up to the castle and, I want to talk to you. What's wrong with my lad? What's he done? He arrived just as and the two gentlemen, the evening started pleasantly enough with only the use of swords, and rapidly deteriorated. And there was Sir Rowland had a pet Barbary ape.
Right.
If anybody's ever been to Gibraltar, run out of Maltesers whilst feeding the Barbary apes, you'll know that they're ever so nice until you run out of Maltesers, and then they'll take your hand off.
Yeah.
But apparently Sir Rowland set his pet Barbary ape on this poor man. And the man was badly mauled and just managed to escape.
Jesus.
Later in the evening, the servants at the castle claimed to have heard Sir Rowland and the monkey ape fighting, and that there was a thunderstorm raging at the time. And then when they dared enter, this was at night, but they waited till the next morning before going into, the Lord's private apartments, and discovered him dead on the floor and the remains of the monkey in the fire.
Oh wow, that's weird.
Or in another version, the monkey had gone. There were different versions, and so the legend has it that the castle is haunted by the ghost of this somewhat, vicious Barbary ape. And there are people who have been there and have claimed that they've seen it. They've been attacked by it. They've heard it. None of the members of staff actually ever have. And the only animals that Carew is really noted for is the bat population that live there. One of the old towers is one of the UK's leading bat conservation areas. And but nevertheless, every gazetteer of Pembrokeshire incorporates the ghost ape of Carew Castle. It's not the only ghostly monkey in the UK. I think Little Dean Hall has a ghost ape as well.
Right, it's interesting.
It's not actually the most bizarre paranormal creature that I'm aware of, because prior to moving down here, I lived in Cheshire.
Oh yeah, Cheshire.
That's the posh bit just opposite Liverpool.
That's how I used to live.
Yeah, and the reason why people in the Wirral had the Mersey, the River Mersey, and the River Dee dug to keep the plagues out. Yeah, keep them scouted. Yeah, we don't want them.
No, we don't want them up there. No, Manchester and Liverpool.
But there are, as you come off the Wirral into Cheshire itself, there are a number of little old villages that sort of date back to Doomsday. And we were going through some of these old Victorian gazetteers. People would, because back in the Victorian era, people would go for a walking holiday around different parts of, the country, and they would write their adventures down.
Yeah.
And one of them recorded a tale of the phantom duck.
Right.
And it's not just a ghostly duck, it's a ghostly headless duck.
Oh, a headless duck. Right.
So the ghost of a headless duck was said to haunt a particular set of crossroads on the outskirts of this little Cheshire hamlet.
Right.
Now we thought, that's got to be the most bizarre I've certainly ever heard of. But it gets even more bizarre because a few years later, we discovered another Cheshire village about 30 miles away also claimed to have a ghostly duck.
We love our ducks.
So I don't know what it is about Cheshire and ghostly ducks. We're kind of getting into the realms here of Most Haunted, Derek and the Ghostly Rabbits. But, two ghost ducks, one of them headless, within 30 miles of each other. There's a pattern emerging there, isn't there?
Yeah, it's crackers, isn't it? Quackers.
Yeah.
So, talking about animals there, animal apparitions there, but so we're going just throwing this question to you, like veterinaries, kind of animal shelters, kind of zoos, all these places, should they have more apparitions there because an animal's life is shorter? That means that there's more chances of an animal or species being deceased. Do you reckon these places should be more active?
Well, I hope not, because think of the average lifespan of a housefly.
God, yeah.
We'd be inundated with ghostly houseflies, wouldn't we? But it's surprising how many pet owners say that they continue to sense or feel or see or hear, a well-loved family pet, a long-term family pet, and cats and dogs, and there are a lot of animals that have paranormal attributions. So that people know that dogs and cats see and hear things that are different to humans, and cats, well, our cat in particular, likes to stare at the strangest things, because it's a cat.
No, that's just
One of, as cat owners will know, one of the why is it doing that? Because it's a cat.
I know, they're funny guys.
But why is the cat looking at it? Because it's a cat. Why is it just pissed over that? Because it's a cat. Cats are unique. I mean, they are probably paranormal. Mary Rose Barrington, a former president, leading luminary in the Society of Psychical Research, coined the term JOT, J-O-T-T, to incorporate all of those weird, odd things that happen to people. But you could put under a paranormal bracket. But JOTT stood for just one of those things. So you would put down something, and then the keys, and then they wouldn't be there, and then they'd appear in a drawer, or so she called this phenomena jotling, or these things were jots, just one of those things. They happen periodically, intermittently. There is no predicting when they're going to do. There's no pattern. I've frozen again. That's not a particularly good one.
All right. I can still see you anyway. There, you're still moving.
I'm not moving on the other one.
All right. Okay.
Anyway, wasn't that a forerunner of what went wrong before?
I know. Yeah.
So we were at an SPR conference one time, and I said to Mary that I think cats can jottle. And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, every cat owner will know that when it's time for bed, and it's time for pussykins to go outside and do cat things. I don't want to go out. You're a cat. You're going out. That's what cats do. Go outside and be a cat. It's raining. I don't care. You're a cat. Go outside and be a cat." If you have, so all the doors and windows are closed. And Fluffykins has been slung out, and then you lock the door, you turn around, and Fluffykins comes back down the stairs purring at you.
All right.
How do they do that?
They can be seen. I've done that. That's happened a couple of times.
Well, you'll come home and there's no sign. You go out for a few hours, you come in, and there's no sign of the cat anywhere. You search under beds, you search linen cupboards, you search on top of wardrobes, you shake a food dish, no sign of the cat.
If they had thumbs, they'd be chopped off.
Then all of a sudden, out of seeming nowhere, the cat appears, going, "Feed me time, feed me time."
I know that's talking about weird animals. We're talking about the ones that we think we're there, But
dogs are nearly as strange, but they're a bit dumber.
Yeah, I know. Well, dogs, we love all types of animals there, but I know the cats have got, I think, more of a character. They've got more of a kind of way there.
They say that dog is man's best friend, and man is a cat's best servant.
That's true. Yeah. Mary says, when our team was in Carew Castle, whilst in a small room, we all sensed and heard a dog in a room with us.
I was at Chingle Hall, which you might be aware of. It used to be the UK's most haunted private house.
Right.
Dated all the way back to the early medieval. Had a number of. It had been investigated by the likes of Peter Underwood and many others, and it had this big reputation. I remember one of our team going up the stairs to one of the haunted rooms upstairs, and stumbling on the stairs as they tripped over a cat.
Right.
That was coming, shot past them on the stairs and caused them to stumble, except there was no cat in the building.
Right.
Or, nobody in the building, the owners didn't have a cat.
Yeah.
And yet this cat seemingly out of nowhere, and they never saw it before. They never saw it afterwards. Nobody else saw a cat.
Yeah.
But there were stories of, apparently a ghost pet cat. So
there's one question here, Mary, which I will go to ask you now, Steve, which is going to be interesting there. When I worked at Loftus Hall, I often heard the sound of horses near the carriage building, clip-clopping along. Now, this is the next question I was going to ask you there, Steve.
Two blokes with coconuts. You've seen them.
Monty Python.
From the tour guides outside going past. Whoa,
but yeah. So that's the answer to the question. I was going to ask about carriages. Why is it that transport of animals like carriages, horse-drawn carriages, like Borley Rectory, or the
one
carriages?
just down the road from here, where there's a small town called Nayland, which was actually the Great Western Railway terminus for the Irish ferry. Back in Brunel's time, it was built as a ferry terminal for Brunel, and the Great Western Railway, which linked to the Irish ferries. And there's a little tiny sort of quiet backwater street that runs parallel to the main high street, and right up until and through the pandemic, people I know who live there report hearing the sound of horse-drawn carriage, clip-clopping, and the wheels sort of rumbling on the tarmac. But I mean, how do you can't set up a microphone and record 24/7, 365 days a year. So, this thing happens occasionally. What do you do? The chance of being able to trace it to something normal or pin it down to something, you are facing an insurmountable proposition. It could just be, there are a Romany population who do have horse-drawn buggies, and it could be late at night that they're, going about their business with a horse-drawn buggy. True. But the opportunities, it's unfeasible. You cannot sit with camera and recorder in the middle of, throughout the night, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, just to try and say, oh yeah, we know what that was.
Do you know why these like cars, and there's planes as well that have been seen on airfields there, do you know why materials are being seen only form of transport?
Well, we've got ghosts of every form of public transport. We've got aircraft, buses,
train,
cars, motorcycles, horses. The why? Well, that's the impossible question, because at the moment we still can't properly define what a ghost is. So, you can't say, oh, well, it happens because. There are some investigators who will say with absolute certainty that they know why it is because. But the reality of it is we still can't even define what a ghost is. So, how can we possibly be more precise than simply throwing up your arms and going, you know what? I don't know. I don't know why people see ghost aeroplanes. But that's part of, the investigation process, is to try and understand the witness's experience. And, as a kind of a route into understanding. But, we don't yet understand all of the mechanisms of the human brain, or of, what actually might exist. People have said it's time slips, and time slips are a possibility. But as Anne Winsper, when we were investigating the Liverpool time slips, we pointed, there is next to no difference between a time slip experience and a haunt experience. How do you even define a poltergeist from a ghost? Because Harry Price used to refer to them all as poltergeists.
Yeah.
So I think what you're dealing with is a continuum of experience. So at one end you would have the, flickery corner of the eye apparition, and at the other end of the scale you would have the full, class 5 materializing vapor, and everything in between, all just on a scale of human experience.
Yeah, I was thinking like a scale kind of thing as one way of measuring what a ghost is, like
we can't measure what something is. We know what it is. We can measure an inch because we've got a definition for that, and we can measure density and pressure and stuff like that because we know what material science is. We know how these things are constructed and how they're made, and how concrete is different than glass.
Yeah.
But we don't know what a ghost is.
True. Yeah.
There are innumerable. If you look in the dictionary, I think the Oxford's English dictionary, it is something like the shade or apparition of a person who is deceased. But then that falls flat, immediately, because you go, well, there's ghost buses.
Yeah, and it might not be as recently deceased as well. It's a crisis manifestation type of
There's
sort
German
of thing.
Shepherd dog at the castle.
Yeah. Ritual, yeah. So Warren says at Ritual Castle there's a ghost of a German Shepherd dog seen or felt. Lots of people visiting the castle. Friend of mine started sneezing one night in the castle, unknown to him. The spirit of the dog had walked into the room and sat between us, laughing out loud, or lollipops. We now believes. That's interesting. I was going to say that like sense. I suppose people would smell a dog or an animal. I suppose more frequently coming in as well. Or
the sense of smelling an animal, particularly a dog, wet dog. I've heard it described on a number of occasions. Wet dog is probably second to pipe tobacco, or I seem to have frozen now all over the place.
You're a ghost.
I'm beginning to think so. We have a haunted live stream. But smell is one of our most powerful senses. We don't give it enough credit, credence in how it controls our experiences. For example, there are smells that will unlock memories. So you might smell a particular smell and it will remind you of your grandmother, of her perfume, or pipe tobacco might remind you of a grandfather, or a smell of a particular might remind you of a family holiday or some other. Smell is a way kind of unlocking memory.
True, yeah.
And our sense of smell is not terribly, still not terribly well understood. Why it's connected to the why it evokes such powerful memories. The only one that has a similar evocative effect is of course our sense of hearing. Many people have a favorite music track, and many couples have their tune. And those songs, that snippet of song might remind you of, like for example, if I hear Edelweiss, I always think of my grandmother, because that was her favorite song. And so smell and hearing both seem to be a key to memory, or unlocking memory in a bringing a past, often forgotten memory to the forefront again. Now, we understand we understand why, because we use memory to remember what the smell is. So the hearing parts of the brain and the vision centers and the olfactory sense of smell are actually connected to the parts of the brain that are used for memory as well. So they are interconnected, but they do something in quite an unusual way. People will be going about, sitting at home, and then all of a sudden they'll get a waft of a smell that nobody else can smell. Now, is the memory creating a hallucination smell?
Yeah.
Because we can hallucinate, You know, we don't, when we think about hallucinations, we tend to think of people, you know, having mad visions or hearing voices. But hallucinations are not some, you know, they're not a condition of mental disease or disorder. Hallucinations are simply, you know, kind of like a daytime dreaming state, an awakened dreaming state, an altered state of consciousness. And it can work for any of the senses. You can hallucinate touch or taste. So
yeah, it's like
it really is a fascinating area of, you know, human experience, how our brain can interact with our you know, normal senses. And because we have to trust our brain, you know, a simple act of, for example, crossing a road, our eyes and ears allow us to judge distance and speed of a car that's coming up, and we you know, our brain figures out, yeah, if you run now you'll get across, and if you cock it up you're going to get hit by the thing. So we do have to implicitly trust our senses to keep us alive. But our senses are not, they're kind of thinking ahead of us. They're using past experiences balanced with you know, the sensory inputs that are being fed into them, and they're trying to come up with a scenario to keep us alive. And it doesn't always get it right.
No, so it's the brain. It's really the brain that can be.
Well, I mean, for example, yeah, the sense of this idea of, I mean, you often hear it. I know what I saw. Well, there are, you know, a psychologist will tell you that you are entirely, you know, at the whim of your brain, because your eyes don't do the seeing; they just collect photons of light and send it on to be processed.
True.
Your brain is actually where these images are then processed into what we determine to be a reality around us, and it can be messed about with. That we have a lampshade hanging from a ceiling downstairs, and if you glance up to it suddenly, sometimes it just looks like an ordinary boring lampshade, and sometimes it looks like it's inside out.
Yeah.
And it's just that your brain can't quite grasp, you know, hasn't quite figured it out, and makes a go at it and puts this image, you know, you think, no, it can't be right. You know, we are at the mercy of our brains, as well as having to rely upon our brains.
So we just, yeah, like I suppose going on to back to Anna mentioned cats. Cats are worshipped in Egypt and in my home. Miss Ella Marie and my cat senses everything here. I'm on a ley line with lots of activity. I was thinking about Eleanor there, and she mentioned, like, I suppose, Egyptians there, cats there. And I suppose,
well, yeah, the Egyptians, you know, all of my weird friends have got Egyptian you know, that bast, isn't it? The cat with earrings.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how they manage to get earrings into a cat. We can't even get, you know, collar on ours. But cats, you know, they are.
Oh, they're special. I love them.
Yeah, I think after we finish Paravision, Cal and I might have to sit down and write Parakitty.
Yeah, yeah. Steve and Dr. Calcu. Well, I won't say anything. But there's maybe Parakitty would be great there. Like, you know, that'd be great. Or Fluffykins. Martin says, sorry guys, got to go do Dad's taxi and get to the sun from work. Hope to chat to you and see you soon. Yeah, we'll see you Warren next year's
cheers,
convention.
Warren. Stay safe.
So we come to the quiz there, so the competition, sorry, not a quiz there. So Joanne, you have a choice between, you can put either sound recorder, Ouija board, portal, or K2 meter. So you got a choice of 4 things to use in the Edinburgh vaults to find the spirit of Mr. Boots and the other 600 ghosts. After they follow Steve down there. So Joanne, if you're there, type in either sound recorder, Ouija board, portal, or K2 meter. One of those 4 things. So if you type in, which one would you choose, Steve?
If I was honest, and having encountered the location of Mr. Boots, spent time there, I would go with the sound recorder.
Sound recorder, sound man. Okay, sound recorder, and Joanna's gone for portal. Okay, so we see at the end of the show if you're both right and go into the Halloween mega draw. Anna says at Loftus Hall, next door was called Houseland, but also Houndsland, and heard phantom dogs there. Makes sense, as I later discovered ley lines there which are associated with hellhounds, keepers of the underworld secrets. But also got cancer shortly after. Coincidence, but legends speak also of black dogs foretelling death. There is one location I was going to say that, like Woodchester Mansion, is it's supposed to be something of. I know there's bats there as well, as we mentioned it there before, but there is supposed to be a hellhound there. Is that correct, there, Steve?
There are innumerable hellhounds. We have one. Pembrokeshire's got 5 or 6. But there's actually one that's in the road that runs between Haverfordwest and where I live. And this thing is, it's your standard hellhound. It's got glowing red eyes the size of coals, and it's about the size of a calf. Blah blah blah, and it scares the bejesus out of people. Fortunately, it hasn't been seen for about 30 years. So yeah, hellhounds are fairly common. I'd love to encounter one night.
It'd be amazing, though. Nice little doggy.
Let the cat in it.
Let the cat away. Sneaky pussykins. Joanne says,
why does it do that? Because it's a cat.
If I smell a lily of the valley, I might back to cottage we lived in 35 years ago.
Is Joanne just saying, confirming. My nana used to use lily of the valley because we used to buy it for every Christmas.
So we're going to go on to the next subject, which is measuring techniques.
So my favourite subject.
Yeah, so we're going to do like this is going to be like pointless. So we're going to see if anyone can get one of these. It'd be great. Yeah, see if you get it.
It's a pity the video stream's frozen because I have with me my paranormal ruler.
Oh, we can still see it there, though.
Well, I can't see any movement on mine, but it's actually calibrated in units of paranormality.
Okay. So
yeah.
Paranormal. So you're joking me.
Of course I'm joking. Of course. What, you haven't got a paranormal ruler?
Well, that's what I'm on about the scale too. That's what that's how much a ghost is about that. I don't something like that or like that. YMCA. So measuring techniques. So the first question I'm going to ask you about this there, Steve, before we go on to what should paranormal. Well, before we go on to like measurements and maybe a bit of gadgets there, what should paranormal investigators use on investigations?
Common sense.
That's it. Next question. So
I refer that answer to the great Tony Cornell,
right?
Who, when describing the use of the SPR's first instrumented attempt at documenting paranormal phenomena, so physical phenomena, temperature drops, noises, etc., they came up with equipment called SPIDER, which was spontaneous paranormal incident data electronic recorder.
Okay.
And it was basically an early version of the equipment we use now. It was I think it was an Acorn computer, linked to it with temperature sensor, sound recorders, blah 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 blah. And he's asked in an interview to talk about it, and he says what it does, and he says, but most of all, you need common sense.
True, yeah. Common sense all the way there,
Yeah.
Lots
of a big bucket full of common sense.
Okay, so I'm going to show a few of the symbols there. I'm going to go on to how sound waves are and all that, but can you explain a few, because every paranormal investigator would have come across this on some of the instruments they would use. So I'm just going to show a few of them there, these few of the units there. Okay. So Steve, first up, can you explain these?
Yeah.
V/M, comma, milliGauss, comma, Tesla.
Yeah, I can explain them all. Dead easy. Next. I have a degree in physics, of course. Yeah, VM, volts per meter.
Perfect.
So it's actually a measure of electrical power density. So it's related to electric field measurements, and so it's the strength of an electric field, not an electromagnetic field. And that's normally measured in volts per meter. So it's how many volts, as it says, miles per gallon, volts per meter. You can measure the amount of power in using watts or milliwatts per meter. So volts per meter, you will see on some EMF meters that use that allow the user to measure both the electric field and the magnetic field. The magnetic field is measured. The SI unit is Tesla. The older sort of imperial unit, if you like, was the milliGauss. Both of them named after. In fact, all three were named after their discoveries: Voltaire, Gauss, the German physicist, and Tesla, the guy that invented the car.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, Nikola Tesla.
Yeah, I was talking to him last week there.
So magnetism, so the magnetic component of the field, is measured using either milliGauss or Tesla.
Tesla, yeah.
It would be micro Tesla because there is although the two scales used, they are actually different, related to one another but different. So it would be milliGauss, micro Tesla. Which is interesting because if you look at EMF meters, which actually measure or supposedly measure two things, they are called EMF meters, electromagnetic field meters. You will see that the scale is usually in milliGauss or microtesla.
Yeah.
Because the device actually isn't an EMF meter. 99% of EMF meters are actually magnetometers. You actually have to have two completely different types of sensor in order to measure both types of field. And some, like the tri-field and the Latnex meter, both incorporate both sensors, but your K2 is a magnetometer and is only giving its, it only measures the magnetic field component.
Yeah, so it's not actually, they're not actually
the units will tell you what it's measuring.
Mm.
And so if you're claiming the electromagnetic fields are 35 milliGauss, you're actually incorrect because it's only measuring the magnetic component.
Right, it's interesting. Like a mel meter, is that any? Do you recommend them as well? No, it's great. Okay.
I'll tell you the problem why I don't recommend any EMF meters except one, and it's so horrendously expensive. Most paranormal groups, although if they stopped buying SLS cameras,
Isotech, that's a good one.
And REM pods and these very expensive digital dowsing paranologies piece of equipment, they could easily afford one. And it's an Aronia HF or NF 5030 meter.
Okay.
And the reason why I will recommend that one and no other is because I'm giving away a lot of my talk here, but there is something that you really, when you take your K2 or your mel meter, it tells you how many microteslas are there or how many milligausses are there.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell you where it's coming from.
The spark origin.
Now, every electromagnetic field has a fingerprint. It's DNA that allow the investigator to absolutely positively say what the source is. And that's the frequency information. Now, if you know the frequency, you will know the source of the electromagnetic field. It's that simple. But most EMF, in fact, almost every EMF meter does not give you frequency information except the Aronia HF. And there is another one, but it's even more expensive. Now, you're in the middle of a field, or you're in the middle of nowhere, castle somewhere. There's no power. There's no there's no wires, and even if there was, you've turned them all off. You've turned off all your mobile phones, all your radios, all your smart devices, your heart pacemakers, everything else. And oh my God, it must be paranormal, because look, the meter is still flashing.
Yeah.
The problem is, you look at the frequency range of a K2. It's about 20 hertz to, I think it's about 10. Is it 10 gigahertz?
10 gigahertz.
It's right through the entire radio spectrum. So they look around and go, well, there were no cell masts nearby, and there were no transmitters, and there were no police cars or aircraft flying past. But that still doesn't rule out all of the shortwave, long wave, medium wave transmitters. Because if they just pulled a radio out of their pocket and tuned it to the BBC World Service or Radio China, it would come booming through. And we realized decades ago that almost every EMF spike that we were seeing was actually radio frequency origin. And once you know the frequency, of course, you can go, oh, well, there's the culprit right there. So I've used the analogy before, and will continue to do so. Unless you know the frequency information, it's kind of like walking down a Victorian street in London and somebody chucking a bucket of something wet over you.
Yeah, you don't know where it came from.
The amplitude information, so how many milliGauss or micro Tesla there are, you know that you're wet. But the frequency information will tell you whether it's a bucket of water or a bucket of piss.
Or rain, or something else.
Yeah.
Or sweat.
So it's, you know you're wet, but you don't know what caused it. But the frequency information, you can find out absolutely what causes it. It's like a DNA, print of what the cause is.
Okay, we're going to the next one. Sorry, Steve. We're going to the next one. So this is PA, DB and DBS.
Yeah.
Can you explain those?
Easily. PA, well, it's not the Paralogical Association, Parapsychological Association. It's an abbreviation for Pascal, or Pascal, which replaced it replaced the millibar. It's a unit of measuring air pressure, and in fact, they measure it in hectopascals, because these units like the Gauss is a Gauss is a big unit. So we divide it up into milliGauss, microGauss, nanogauss. But the basic unit of measuring pressure, air pressure, is the Pascal. And we measure you've seen it on the news. Oh, it's going to be high pressure this week. It's going to be lovely and sunny. The pressure is 1031 hectopascal. Now, fortunately, 1 hectopascal equals 1 millibar, or 1,000th of a bar. And the bar is about 14 point something PSI.
Right.
So it's equivalent. Yeah, it's just a measure of air pressure.
And DB and DBS sort of similar.
Yeah, well, DB and DBS, there's DBZ, DBC, DBA, is a decibel. It's a unit of measuring sound pressure. It's similar to loudness. So it's the amount of pressure that's behind a sound wave, or it can contain. The unit of S or Z refers to the weighting that's used. So unless it's a little s, which shouldn't ever be there, but some people put 10 dBs, like there's 10 of them all coming along together. But it's actually decibel.
Yeah, right. On to the next one there. So
okay.
Talking about sound now, we talk about something else. RH.
RH, well, it could be
centigrade.
Actually, relative humidity.
Yeah.
And here is another classic mistake of paranormal investigation, because the other two refer to temperature, centigrade and Fahrenheit, and of course you've got obviously the SI unit, which is Kelvin. We over here, Britain and I know that Ireland also has this. We change temperature scales. In the winter, we measure the temperature. You put the news on or open your newspaper. In the winter, We measure coldness in centigrade because that way we get to zero quicker.
Yeah.
Because, it's freezing outside, or it'll be -1 Celsius centigrade, which doesn't look quite as good as it'll be +27.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
But in the summer, the newspapers all switch to Fahrenheit and go, it's going to be nearly 87 degrees.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're all now measuring, because it sounds better.
Yeah. So more bigger number. Yeah. And a smaller.
So you go to that sort of mistake, basic, investigation 101 error, or error 101, is RH, relative humidity, which is the amount of moisture that's contained in a given volume of air. So it's how wet it is. How wet is the air? But it changes with temperature. So if you're going to quote the relative humidity, you must always quote the temperature. So it would be, when you say, and the humidity was 70%, well, that's meaningless unless it's 70% at 21 degrees Celsius, because it will change with the temperature, because warm air can hold more moisture. It's kind of like hot tea will dissolve sugar better than cold water.
True, yeah.
So you must always, if you are going to measure humidity, and that's why if you look at any hygrometer, the item used for measuring humidity, you will also see that it's attached to a thermometer, and it's a thermohygrometer, because you can't really measure humidity without knowing the temperature.
It's interesting, very much interesting there, And the last one there,
science.
Next one there is S&M. No, sorry, that's the wrong unit. That's completely different.
Yeah, no, that's it. No, we don't know. We'll do that one later.
So we'll put more look into this now. See if it might brighten up the subject. Lux
is a measurement of. Well, it's a measurement of light intensity, but there are actually two, because you've got emitted light intensity, which is lux, and then you've got reflected light intensity, because that which is measured differently, because obviously all objects either emit or reflect light. That's why we can see them.
True.
If they didn't, the whole world would look very black.
True. Yeah. Yeah.
And the other one, volts.
Volts. Yeah. Velocity, as in vibration. Might spell it. So.
Yeah, big V. Because
it's a massive big V.
Well, yeah, you don't.
Sorry, I should have put.
Yeah, you should have. Because volts is actually little v.
Oh, I got it wrong on the previous one. Yeah.
Anyway,
so
I thought you would, but the velocity, I don't think is used in paranormal investigating.
So is it NMGA or something like that? Vibration. I think it's using some instruments there, like.
But are you measuring? There are several different ways of measuring vibration. You can measure the frequency of it. You can measure the velocity, which is kind of a similar thing. But it's often measured in. Oh God, no! I'm going to trip myself up here. I've actually forgotten.
See, this is for the pointless answer. Go on, pointless.
It's one of its units. The symbol is G, and it's a gravitational unit.
Yes, grav.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And that's how we traditionally measure accelerations.
So just a quick. Before we do this, there, Steve. Yeah. Just go through this quickly. Just go through what people have said there. Eleanor says we'll go back to paranormal investigator ethics and respect and write things down. I think that's about the cats.
No.
So
actually, Eleanor's made an interesting point. Writing things down is really important, and it's something as an investigator, I always hold great store by. But you've also got to balance it to a degree with a little common sense, because if you are standing in a location and you are witnessing something extraordinary, then, you know, our team are, it's drilled into them, you're going to write it down. But you don't write it down there and then, because you don't want to be I'll just, it's kind of like, you know, staring at the screen. You write it down immediately the experience has ended, so it's fresh in your memory. You don't interrupt the experience to write down, you know, oh, hang on a minute, I'll just make some notes. So it's balancing. It goes back to what I said earlier about common sense.
Yeah.
And you don't can you see that ghost over there?
Yeah. You wait until when you think the experience is ended, or
I'm waiting for this question from Mary. It just keeps stopping.
I know.
What is your fav?
So she's still saying, what is your so I go for having an open mind and understanding that not everything you hear and see is not necessarily paranormal. There are teams out there that manipulate their equipment readers to entertainment value of large groups. Steve, what is your favorite Irish location to investigate? You should have just said that, Mary. I'm joking.
It's my favorite location.
Yeah, in Ireland.
Oh, in Ireland. It's either the Athenaeum in Enniscorthy, or no, I would say Duncannon Fort.
Yeah.
Because I think I was the last, you know, amongst the last group of people ever to get in there, because shortly afterwards they decided to close it to public access for under some, you know, we've got to rewire it, and there was some asbestos, and there was a ghostly monkey there, and but
was that?
I was joking. But
I bought half a duck over there, so
Duncannon, you know, you drive along, you know, the Hook Peninsula, and you see all the signs as you get off the ferry, Rosslare, Loftus Hall, Ireland's most haunted house, you know, hanging on every hedgerow and junction, alongside Marian shrines and little memorials for 1798.
Yeah.
But Duncannon has got an equally fascinating history. So's Hook Lighthouse, but Duncannon Fort, I think, probably, Duncannon.
Must like Kerry and Cork around where we live there, and Limerick there. It'd be great to see yourself down this.
There was some fantastic. Like we did go up to Kerry, and I spent a week chasing ghosts around the Beara Peninsula.
Oh yeah,
down at Castletown Bear.
Oh well. There was apparently haunted by one ghost, but after you went, there was about 700 or 2,000. 2,000.
Nothing. One of the best things about the
Beara Peninsula. With you.
One of the best things about the Beara Peninsula is there's a road that runs, I think, from Castletown Bear back to I can't remember the name of the other town now, but it goes over a road. It's like zigzags up like an alpine thing, and right at the top of it's a big cross, big crucifix, and it's called the Priest's Leap. I don't know.
Yeah, I've been up there.
You know,
I haven't been up there, but I've heard it. It's close to near Bantry. Yeah, it must be. Yeah, I think it's near Bantry. Yeah,
it's just beyond Bantry. Well, we drove the Priest's Leap the first time in thick low cloud and fog. We didn't see anything.
No.
You know, small car, nice twisty country road, throwing the car through the bend. These bends are great, aren't they? Yeah. And then going back the next day, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky, we realised what the road really looked like. We went very slowly.
Yeah, Jesus, yeah. It's different when you do actually see it clearly. Yeah, you go a bit slower.
It's that 500-foot drop doing there.
Hughes from Capper says, "Hi Steve, I remember chatting to you about infrasound at the paranormal conference in Dublin. You said about the 4-in-1 environmental meter, the multifunction meter. Yeah,
well, you can, if you read Paracoustics, it actually contains the original. When I was researching infrasound, I discovered that there is a way you can't measure the infrasound because you don't have the technology. But something as simple as your smartphone, you can find out whether it's there. And there's a little trick. It uses the different weighting scales, the A scale and the C weighting scales, which are on almost every sound meter and on almost every sound measuring app. And if, simply put, although there's a more detailed explanation in Paracoustics, if the C weighting scale is noticeably higher than the A weighting scale or the 0 weighting scale, because DBA doesn't add any weighting, DBC adds weighting to make it the equivalent to the effects on the human. But if C is higher than A, then you will have infrasound almost certainly present. So one of the quick tests I like to do and still do when checking the location is I use my smartphone a lot. These are incredibly powerful little computers, and you can plug all manner of sensors into them. I don't use the Ghost radar apps or any of the other EVP Echovox apps, but you can plug in thermometers, sound meters, microphones, all manner of, and you've got a camera and video recorder, sound recorder. But by using a good quality sound level meter with your smartphone, it's walk around, and if I like to think, well, is it worth me bringing the infrasound kit out, because it is, it's fairly hefty, and do detailed measurements, I like to sort of do a litmus test for infrasound. And I just pull out the smartphone, and if the C weighting after a minute or so is higher than the A weighting, then it might be worth considering coming back and doing more detailed measurements.
It fluctuates a lot, doesn't it?
It really is as simple as that. Your basic 4-in-1 environment meter, your sound meter, your smartphone, iPad. If you've got sound measuring app on it that allows you to weight the measurements C or A, you can actually do some very crude, rough and ready litmus tests for the presence of infrasound.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and
but not scientific measurements. You can't say, oh, there was a lot of infrasound, we measured it with. It simply won't work. It doesn't measure it to a scientific standard. It just gives you a heads up that it's worth measuring.
Yeah, there's a type of digital called a Zoom. I think it's Zoom there, and it's got a FD analyzer there. It can only go up to 10 hertz there. No, 20 hertz there. But you can see with the spectrogram how far, like, there might be a peak.
Well, I've got the H8, H6 ones, and the new mini ones, the studio ones. But it doesn't matter how much you spent on your Zoom recorder or your Tascam recorder, because commercial audio equipment is designed deliberately not to work below 20 hertz. Sound engineers hate it. It's called rumble. And they will, that annoying wind noise you get on microphones.
Yeah.
They will do everything in their power to get rid of it. And that includes making the electronics inside. I have a state-of-the-art MacBook computer, and it doesn't work below 20 hertz. It can't, because the audio hardware and software, and in the Zoom recorders and in the Rode, they do not work below 20 hertz, because it's not sound that we want to hear. It disrupts it disrupts the quality of the audio that we're listening to. So these groups that say, oh, we've recorded infrasonic EVP, and then they play a trace from an FFT frequency readout that shows big bars bouncing around below sort of 20 hertz. What they're actually showing is the inherent computer machine noise, the electronic noise of the machine. I don't mean like real noise. I mean just the workings of the computer,
the mechanism.
Just electrons whizzing about,
and the wiring close by. I just go on to this whilst we're talking about sound things. So can you tell us this is a wavelength equals velocity divided by frequency, and what is that?
Well, it is what it says. I mean, you can also switch that around, so you can get at frequency from velocity, over wavelength, and you can get the velocity of a sound wave by putting the the wavelength over the frequency. It's like three-sided triangle. Wavelength is it's related to, or the best way to describe it is, if you looked at it on an oscilloscope, you will see the sound looking like a very rough C, unless you're hitting a pure tone note, a sine wave, like 440 hertz, which is middle C on a piano, or a tuning fork, for example. Now, if you want to work out, say, the resonant frequencies of a room, so you know how long the room is, you can measure it with a tape measure. Well, it's possible. You can do acoustic tests called steeper tests, where you can clap or pop balloons or have speaker setups, or you can, by measuring it, you can work out, because you know the length, you know the velocity, the speed of sound in air, which is 343 meters per second. So you can work out the frequency by dividing the velocity by the length of the room. And so you can work out the resonant frequencies. And in fact, you'll see, if you any readers of Paracoustics or the infrasound paper that's on the Parascience website page, you'll actually see that's how the Tandy, how Vic Tandy's original claims of 18 point something, 18.7 hertz, was looked at and realized that there wasn't just one standing wave. Tandy claimed that there was one standing wave in the room, but of course a room comprises a box, and you've got sound waves going long ways end to end, width ways side to side, and up and down, and bouncing around, all off, reflecting back and forth inside. So you actually had a lot of different sound waves, not just a single standing sound wave. Many of, so wavelength is useful, but probably a little involved for your average ghost hunt. It's something that I would use occasionally when I'm analysing a sound, but it isn't something that I would routinely bother about.
At these places, like these haunted locations, like they're mostly cold, obviously. Most of them are all derelict there, Does that enhance more EVP kind of phenomena as it slows down? As I mentioned, like temperature has an influence on sound waves?
Not significantly. No. It's temperature has a small part in changing the frequency of sound, but it doesn't change the frequency. The speed of sound, for example, to break it at sea level, it requires that you go 760 miles an hour, thereabouts. But you can break you can go twice the speed of sound at the same, over ground speed at 60,000 feet, because the air is a lot less dense. Warm air is less dense than cool air. So it does change the frequency of sound, but only by, So, if you were doing measurements of wavelength, it really, the sort of temperatures that you're likely to find in our part of the world, unless you're in the sort of, far Antarctic or Arctic, 343 meters per second, give or take, a meter or so in either direction, you wouldn't put you far out. So no, it's not. It wouldn't be significant. It wouldn't be significant enough. An EVP measured at 100,000 feet would change the speed of sound significantly.
Yeah, it was just like the thin air, like Antarctica and all that.
Yeah, it would have to be. It would have to be. Well, it's also extremely temperature related, because obviously so it. No, best way to is forget that. The idea that it would change significantly enough to be worthy of any attention.
True, yeah. Yeah. Joanne says the Athenaeum Museum and Scotland was a very interesting place to investigate. Yeah, Joanne's been there loads of times there. It's a great old spot there. May says, I got to go. New Ross is hosting the UK, Ireland, Scotland and Wales Archery Championships this weekend, and I'm helping out. Lots of longbows coming from the UK. Not surprised when you think of Agincourt. So, Mary, there we have archery maybe when the New Ross in next February.
Well, I've got my longbow just next to me here on the wall.
Oh, that's interesting. But we come to the competition. Oh, well, no, just one more last question.
Go on. Only
Steve,
one.
Get this one out there. So I know you've seen your infrasound.
It's because it's a cat.
It's a cat. That's what I was going to say. When you mentioned this, when you mentioned plugging something, you plug it into for the sound. You plug it into your thing. The cat will do it.
Yeah.
But I was going to say,
I was once asked, what would be your perfect, if you could design a perfect paranormal, piece of equipment, what would it be? I said it was a USB socket that fits into a cat.
It's a cat. But that's probably close to what the last question is like you've experienced with infrasound, you're the top guy in infrasound there, and you've got the equipment to do it there. Is there anything there that you see coming up anything that you think can be used in the paranormal field in the future in regards to trying to monitor or analyze stuff in the area? So for explaining psychophysical changes,
Well, you can't predict quite what is going to come next. I mean, paranormal community are incredibly creative in the way that they conceive and develop pieces of equipment. We've got the REM pod and we've got the millimeter and we've got I say incredibly creative. They're creative in terms of marketing more than anything else, because most of these pieces of equipment are basically rehashed from remarkably similar pieces of equipment, but just put in a Gothic box. Add a few crystals, some Christmas lights, and guitar effects pedal, and you're away.
Can't be Christmas lights.
But I yeah, they really do encourage paranormal activity. Ask Steve Hobb. I urge every paranormal investigator to go back and start again measuring temperature. And I don't mean waving a laser thermometer around. What I mean is temperature is the only physical variable where there is reliable, solid, documented evidence of unusual temperature anomalies coexisting with reported, so the objective temperature variation and the subjective, hey, I saw, I heard an unusual experience. It is only one that we have this objective, gathered data for.
Yes.
And you look at the number of teams with their REM pods, millimeters, K2s, paranormal bears, and all manner of other, flashy Christmas decoration adorned
Cat balls.
devices, paranormal music boxes, cat balls.
That many cats ago.
Yeah. Why did it move, ghost cat?
That's the ghosts of pussykins.
Yeah. What happens to a cat when it dies? It comes back and plays with ghost balls. Don't, for God's sake, neglect temperature. But if somebody says they feel colder, don't accept that they feel that the temperature must have changed, because we know that people, we are terribly poor at reporting temperature.
The dermis, the outer layers.
Psychologists have studied this effect of misreporting temperature, experienced temperature. So the temperature outside. Well, here's an example: two people, summer's day, in Ireland, One's going, is it just me or is it freezing? God, no, I'm because we how we perceive temperature is not the same as what the temperature is. But there are well recorded instances where the temperature, the real temperature, has done something highly unusual, verging on starting to defy the second law of thermodynamics and the other laws that govern physics, because it shouldn't be able to do what it's doing. And at the same time, people are saying, I am having a paranormal experience.
Yes, and they're saying, there's something else that's happened at the same time.
Yeah. So you haven't just got a weird temperature, you've got, and it doesn't just go down. There are reports and accounts of it going up as well.
Yeah, heat is.
But what we don't have are investigators. They're not really interested in temperature because it's not exciting. What is exciting is if you're dragging a group of people around paying 30, 40 quid a night for the pleasure of being there, they want to see, they want to hear EVPs. A spirit box, it's like crack cocaine.
Yeah.
You put one of them on and it's immediately, you've got half a crowd around you and they're all going, how many people are in this room? It doesn't matter what the number it says. If it says there are 7, it'll go, and there's 3 people there. They go, well, there's 3 of us and 4 of them.
Yeah. And Jeff outside the other room and Steve
yeah,
in the other side of the building.
And can you say my name? Yeah. Well, it could be anything. But like we see faces in fires, we hear things as well. Our senses are fallible.
So temperature is the way to go.
Yeah. One of the most important pieces of equipment that when we were building the SPR's Ghost Investigators kits, these are for the new investigation team that the SPR now has. One of the very first thing that we added after notebook, pen, torch,
paper.
Oh, I knew there was something.
You said notebook, pen, paper, torch. Yeah. Powder. No.
Whizzer thermometer.
Thermometer. Yeah.
Because it's important to measure, and in the past we've when people have reported temperature changes, we don't take their word for it. We don't use laser thermometers because they tell you the temperature of the first solid that is in front of the sensor. Is we actually instrumented people. We had temperature sensors sort of sewn onto jackets that people could put on, so that we could actually measure the temperature. Now it's even easier because we have thermal imaging. Now, thermal imaging will never find a ghost, and it won't see your farts, and it won't let you see through people's clothes. All of these myths of thermal imaging. You cannot see a ghost on a thermal imager because we don't know what a ghost is, so we don't know what it looks like on a thermal imager. But what it can do is it can allow, if you wanted to document the temperature of a room, it would take you, the old-fashioned method was to divide the room into grid squares, let's say a meter box, from floor to ceiling, front to back, side to side, and take perhaps 50 or 100 individual temperature measurements in that space, and then basically average them all together to give you the ambient average. We can do that now in like 10 seconds with a TI. Because the software, you take your thermograph, the image from the thermal imager, you load it into the software that is often supplied with the cameras, and you can look at the individual spot temperature of every single pixel in that location, in that picture. You can then also do, you can do radiometric measurements using the data, these thousands of points of measurement. And if you've set up the thermal imager properly, then you can actually do an entire, and they're used professionally by building surveyors and by engineers to do detailed measurements, and that's the role of a thermal imager.
True.
It's an incredibly useful device, but if you look at the way paranormal investigators are using it, they're sort of I can see a ghost on thermal image. Or the great mythology of thermal images that they can. Oh, we've had some fun with that one. People believing that they can see through clothes.
People.
Well, they don't, but they kind of look like they might. It's like the old like when Sony first brought out the night vision, the night shot system on the infrared camcorders, which work on the amount of infrared light that's being emitted or blocked from the object. So if somebody had on a thick pair of jeans, you would see that their legs would appear to be pretty dark if it was white hot black cold, because not much heat, not much infrared is being given off because it's being blocked by the trousers. Now, in situations where that person was wearing a set of lightweight jogging bottoms and say bikini underwear, then the thermal imager would clearly show, because it would show you the difference in emitted infrared, and you could say, "Oh, you've got a bikini on. How did you do that?" Because I can see the emitted infrared that's coming from, and it's being blocked by the two layers of fabric rather than one. So
that's ghosts and bikinis. That's
it can't see through clothing, but it appears that it can, and thermal imaging can do a similar trick. But it's a great trick for bamboozling people, or having a laugh, whilst you're waiting for the next ghost to come down the corridor.
So on that level, seeing underwear and all that, we'll just come to the quiz. So for you there, Joanne there, and Steve, you picked the sound recorder, and Joanne, you picked the portal. I'm only going to reveal the right answer, and it's
the sound recorder because I'm taking one.
We'll see. Yes. So sorry, Steve and Joanne. After all that, it was the Ouija board. Obviously, it's got to be the Ouija board. It's not going to be a sound recorder.
What are you going to do? Beat Mr. Boots to death with it?
Bam, 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 bam. So yes, unfortunately,
throwing a cat at him.
Yeah, the cat. It was a cat. Before we go on to Stephen, what else is coming up for Steve? This is coming up soon as well. This is
dun, dun, dun.
Your Ouija hour, and Steve will be there as well. I'm only joking. This is coming up another week's time now. On the 17th there, folks, we're going to be doing the Ouija hour. Steve, what you got anything coming up in the future? Obviously, apart from the convention that coming to the 18th of February.
Apart from the convention, I'm really looking forward to that, actually.
Looking forward to you.
I always love coming over to Ireland, and it's a part of it's a part of Ireland I know well, so there's less chance of me getting lost this time.
Cool.
Like when I drive to Kinnity. But I've got so many friends over there. It's kind of, at one point we did actually think about moving over there, but the Irish government stepped in and said no. Because I as you know, like President Obama and every other American president, you know, my ancestry from my great grandparents are on both sides Irish.
Cool.
So it always kind of feels like going home. So I'm really looking forward to that. In the meantime, currently busy with a Japanese documentary film crew, which nobody will ever see because it'll be in Japan, but it's on infrasound. In fact, we've been there all day filming. I'm going to go back tomorrow for some more. Working on Paravision with Professor Cal Cooper now.
Oh, he's a professor now. I can't change it.
He's been upgraded. And preparing for the SPR conference, the ASAP Seriously Strange event where I'm speaking. And then I'm off to try and educate the colonials of New England again in late September. So lots of time at the computer writing informative and interesting presentations.
And it'd be great to see you there next, Steve. All the best for the next few months, and we will be checking in with you there.
Oh, and the school holidays are coming up. Oh, Jesus.
The school holidays? Oh, right. We've already got them here, like, you know.
Yeah, I've got 6 weeks of the little shit. Sorry, did I say that out loud?
No. Oh, yes, you are. Sorry, Steve. Joanne says, never mind. I think that's towards the competition, not the school holidays.
Oh, you need a whole heap of sympathy for them school holidays.
Thanks, guys, for an interesting show. Come to Wexford. Yes, we're all going to meet in Joanne. You'll be there as well.
I've been to Wexford 1,000 times. In fact, I've been there so often. The boys, whenever we go over there, go, "We're not going to feckin' Wexford again." We actually call it in our house because we've stayed there so many times. They call it feckin' Wexford.
You've got the accents there.
No, it's Enniscorthy.
It's coffee.
I've been over there. I always come back at the end of visits over there for a week or two. Actually, sounding like I'm from the southeast.
Now, it'd be great to see you there. See Brian from Matt Martin from Belfast Paranormal Investigators. Thanks a lot, Brian, last weekend for the camping.
I'm not even going to attempt a Belfast accent.
He says, "Great show, guys." Brian does sound fun. You probably see Brian as well then next year.
I'm sure actually Brian and I've met.
Yes, you have. I think Brian was at the Leprechaun Museum when you were there as well.
God bless him.
12
God bless him.
12 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, so, the legend of the astral turf.
The astral
turf.
That
story. No, astral turf.
Yeah.
We made quite a few euro for charity with astral turf.
Yeah. So we'll for next show as well, on this next show of the GhostÉire Channel, we have Paul McAleer from Sky Sightings Northern Ireland. He's going to be talking about UFOs, UAPs,
I've been to Northern Ireland. You can't see the sky. It's kind of like West Wales. Every time there's anything interesting happening in the sky, eclipses, meteor showers, whatever, it's cloudy and it rains. So I'm guessing sky sighting means that they have an anomaly. Oh my God, there's the sky.
well, Paul will be
because that would certainly apply here.
I know it's definitely here as well, like in the south. But Paul will be explaining that there as well. And Bridget says from Seekers of the Afterlife, can't wait to see. Yeah, Bridget will be there as well next year. David here says another awesome show. Cheers, David. David's in Scotland at the moment. He's on a
nothing
boat.
To do with me.
Nothing to do.
Scotland. I was up in Edinburgh earlier this year. Another place where I spend a lot of time.
Beautiful place there. So, folks, thanks for contributing to the show. Thank you, Steve, as well, for contributing.
Been a pleasure.
To the show. And it's great. And say hi to the cats for me there, and love to the family. Can't wait to see you soon.
Our cat is called Stella. Stella C. No, her full name is Stella C.
Stella C.
I'm not going to explain it. If you know your paranormal history, you will know why she's called Stella C.
Stella C. We got two cats ourselves. One's called Brain, and one's called Moo Cat.
Oh God.
Yeah, Pinky went off somewhere, so we're left with Brain.
Pinky in the brain
doesn't really help anymore.
my father-in-law used to have a cat when he was small called Lung.
Lung.
Yeah, go figure. Go figure. A cat called Lung.
But that's why they're so mysterious, because we give them shitty names.
Yeah, we've had one cat in the past. We called it Cooking Fat.
Cooking Fat.
And another one was called Wolfie.
Wolfie.
And Fido.
Fido. Yeah, Brian.
There's a tradition in our house. We always, most of our pets end up with names that are sort of contrary to,
Different.
to what they are. So, we did once have a dog called Tiddles as well.
On that note, folks, I won't see you
going.
next time. I'll see you in the near distance. Goodbye for now. Love everyone. Bye.
I wouldn't dream of kissing anybody, not in the middle of a pandemic.